Sophia Reynolds moved through the gleaming halls of the Kane penthouse with a mixture of pride and quiet apprehension. At 8 months pregnant, she felt the familiar heaviness of her belly, a reminder of the life growing inside her and the responsibilities that awaited. The penthouse was a masterpiece of modern luxury, floor-to-ceiling windows that offered sweeping city views, polished marble floors that reflected the sunlight like liquid, and minimalist decor that whispered sophistication and wealth. To any outsider, Sophia's life seemed like a dream, a combination of elegance, status, and comfort that most could only imagine. Social media followers envied her carefully curated posts, where she and Julian appeared as the epitome of love, glamour, and success. Yet behind the glittering exterior, cracks were beginning to show, subtle but unmistakable. Julian Kane, her husband, once attentive and charming, had become increasingly distant. Business meetings that seemed urgent kept him away from home for days, and even when present, his mind appeared elsewhere, glued to his phone, focused on messages and notifications that demanded constant validation. Dinner plans were cancelled without explanation, promises left unfulfilled, and shared moments reduced to hurried exchanges. Julian's obsession with appearances had grown into a consuming force, one that prioritized his ego and public image over the emotional well-being of his wife. Sophia noticed the changes with a mixture of confusion and denial. She reminded herself that Julian was under pressure, that his attention to business was part of providing for their future, that the late nights and distant glances were temporary. Deep down, she still believed in the love that had brought them together, in the vows they had exchanged, and in the life they were supposed to build as a family. What she did not yet perceive was the subtle shift of his attention elsewhere. Julian's mind was increasingly captivated by another woman, someone who offered admiration, excitement, and the validation he craved more than the love of his wife. Each day, Sophia's perfect world became more fragile, the warmth of their once intimate relationship giving way to the chill of neglect. She remained unaware of the storm quietly gathering, one that threatened not just her heart but the very foundation of the life she thought was unshakable. Isabella Vaughn had a presence that was impossible to ignore. Every entrance she made seemed calculated, a careful blend of elegance and allure that drew attention effortlessly. Her charm was intoxicating, her compliments precise, and her sense of timing impeccable. She thrived on admiration, drama, and influence, and when she set her sights on Julian Kane, it was clear she intended to ensnare him completely. At first, her approach was subtle, flattering messages on social media, carefully worded emails praising his accomplishments, and casual remarks during networking events that hinted at shared ambitions. Each word, each gesture, was designed to appeal to Julian's fragile ego, to fill the void left by Sophia's perceived predictability and domestic focus. Julian, already obsessed with validation and public perception, found himself captivated by Isabella's attention. Unlike the quiet, patient love he received from Sophia, Isabella offered exhilaration, admiration, and a reflection of the powerful image he wished to project. Late-night meetings disguised as business discussions became private encounters, charged with flirtation and excitement. Online exchanges followed, where Isabella's comments and posts amplified the intensity of their connection, leaving Julian increasingly distant from the wife who waited faithfully at home. Encouraged by Isabella, Julian began to flaunt his influence and assert control in ways that openly marginalized Sophia. Her pregnancy, once a cause for shared care and tenderness, was now framed by Isabella as an inconvenience, a constraint on his freedom and lifestyle. Julian, under Isabella's subtle manipulation, justified his absences and indulgences, convincing himself that he was entitled to admiration and excitement wherever it could be found. The secret meetings soon escalated into moments of public display, subtle enough to avoid outright scandal but unmistakable to those paying attention. Laughter shared too long, lingering glances, and carefully timed social media posts signaled a bond that Sophia could sense but not yet define. At home, the tension was palpable. Julian's distractions, absences, and emotional withdrawal created a coldness that Sophia could feel but could not fully articulate. Every day, Isabella's influence grew, sowing seeds of distance, mistrust, and heartache, shaping a household where love was replaced by manipulation, and devotion was slowly edged out by desire and ambition. Sophia had begun to notice the subtle but unsettling changes in Julian's behavior, small inconsistencies that grew larger with each passing day. His phone, once casually placed on the coffee table, was now always tucked into a drawer or clutched in his hand, his fingers scrolling obsessively whenever she entered the room. He answered calls in hushed tones, shut screens quickly, and seemed to constantly check notifications with a distracted intensity that made Sophia's heart tighten. His absences became more frequent and unexplained. A supposed late-night business meeting here, a networking dinner there, each excuse felt rehearsed, hollow, and increasingly unconvincing. The penthouse, once a sanctuary of warmth and comfort, began to feel cold and isolating. The sprawling rooms, polished marble floors, and panoramic city views could no longer mask the emptiness she felt when Julian was absent or emotionally distant. Even in her late pregnancy, Sophia found herself managing nearly all the household duties alone, preparing meals, organizing appointments, ensuring the home was in order, and attending to the small, quiet needs of her unborn child. The physical strain weighed heavily, but it was the emotional burden that pressed hardest, leaving her feeling exhausted, fragile, and increasingly anxious. Small, inexplicable details heightened her unease. A faint perfume lingering on his clothing, a quick smile when looking at his phone, an air of secrecy that seemed to radiate from his every gesture, these signs whispered of another presence she could not yet see. Sophia's mind churned with fear, suspicion, and uncertainty. Could Julian truly be drifting away, or was she misinterpreting innocent interactions? The thought that someone else might have captured his attention became increasingly difficult to dismiss. Her attempts to confront him gently were met with impatience or irritation, leaving her unsure how to address the growing chasm. Each passing day, the sense of isolation intensified, eroding her confidence and filling her with a quiet dread. Sophia could feel the walls of her carefully constructed life closing in, and the emotional distance between her and Julian expanded. The cracks in their marriage, once hidden behind wealth and appearances, were now undeniable. She sensed the storm brewing just beyond the surface, a betrayal that threatened not only her heart but the stability of her entire world. Julian Kane's disregard for Sophia became glaringly obvious when he announced his plans for a luxurious getaway, citing a high-profile business retreat that conveniently aligned with his growing relationship with Isabella Vaughn. The destination was exquisite, 5-star resorts, private beaches, and exclusive experiences designed to impress social media audiences and colleagues alike. To Julian, it was both a playground and a stage, a chance to showcase success and indulgence. To Sophia, it was a devastating betrayal. Her due date loomed just days away, and every moment of her pregnancy had been colored by anticipation, anxiety, and the hope that Julian would remain a supportive partner. When Sophia pleaded with him to stay, her voice shaking and tears brimming, Julian waved her concerns aside as though they were inconsequential. "Sophia, this is important," he said, the firmness in his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "I can't just cancel. You know how these opportunities work. I'll be fine. You'll be fine too." His words were cold, dismissive, and selfish, emphasizing his priorities, personal pleasure, public perception, and the validation he received from Isabella. Every argument Sophia made, every desperate appeal, was met with a polite yet firm deflection, leaving her powerless and heartbroken. Friends and family observed the growing tension with silent concern. They saw the cracks forming, the fear and hurt in Sophia's eyes, and the casual arrogance in Julian's demeanor. Yet no one intervened directly, unsure whether speaking out would escalate the conflict or further harm Sophia. The helplessness of their inaction only mirrored the isolation Sophia felt, reinforcing her sense of abandonment. As Julian departed with Isabella, social media cameras and curated posts in tow, Sophia remained at the penthouse, her heart heavy with dread and anticipation. She tried to prepare herself for the labor, for the delivery, and for the possibility of facing those pivotal moments alone. The contrast between their experiences could not have been starker. Julian immersed in luxury, laughter, and indulgence with his mistress, while Sophia navigated the final days of pregnancy with fear, solitude, and the painful realization that the man she trusted most had chosen self-interest over love, duty, and family. The morning of Sophia's delivery arrived with a mix of anticipation and dread. Her contractions began subtly but quickly intensified, each wave of pain sharper than the last, a relentless reminder that the moment she had long awaited was finally here. Panic crept in as she realized the gravity of facing labor alone. Julian, blissfully unaware, was unreachable, his phone going straight to voicemail as he lounged on a sun-drenched terrace somewhere far away with Isabella, entirely engrossed in their luxurious vacation. Sophia's heart ached at the absence of the man who should have been by her side, offering comfort, support, and reassurance. Relying on a close friend in the building staff, Sophia was assisted into a waiting vehicle, each bump in the road sending waves of sharp, crippling pain through her body. The drive to the hospital was tense and fraught with fear, each contraction made her grip the seat as though it could hold her together, each breath a desperate attempt to remain calm despite the terror coursing through her. Emotional collapse threatened to overtake her, feelings of abandonment, frustration, and helplessness surged as she pictured Julian relaxing somewhere, oblivious to the suffering he had left behind. Upon arrival, the hospital staff immediately took charge. Nurses moved with gentle efficiency, checking vitals, preparing monitors, and offering words of encouragement. Sophia's fear was met not with indifference but with professionalism and compassion. Their hands steadied her, their voices reassured her, and their presence anchored her amidst the chaos of pain. Every instruction was delivered with care, every movement aimed at her safety and that of her unborn child. The contrast between Julian's selfish indulgence and the genuine care she received at the hospital could not have been starker. While he prioritized leisure and appearances, strangers demonstrated empathy, dedication, and humanity. Sophia clung to these gestures of kindness, drawing strength from their steady presence even as the contractions racked her body. Amid the fear and suffering, a flicker of resilience ignited within her. Though abandoned by the man she had trusted most, Sophia realized that life, courage, and support could still be found, sometimes in the most unexpected places, from those who acted without thought of ego, pleasure, or personal gain. Julian Kane was lounging by the infinity pool, Isabella Vaughn perched elegantly beside him, sipping a cocktail and laughing at a joke he barely heard. The sun glinted off the water, the soft breeze tousled his hair, and for a moment, he allowed himself to forget the world he had temporarily left behind, especially the very pregnant Sophia, whom he had dismissed just hours earlier. His phone buzzed insistently against the polished marble table. At first, he ignored it, assuming it was another business notification or a minor interruption. But the call persisted, and when he finally glanced at the screen, the name of Sophia's doctor flashed in bold letters. "Julian, this is urgent," the voice on the line said, calm but firm. "There's been a serious complication during delivery. Sophia's blood pressure dropped suddenly, and we are taking every measure to stabilize her and the baby. You need to come immediately." The words hit him like a hammer. Julian's chest tightened, and a cold wave of panic surged through him. Suddenly, the carefree laughter of the vacation, the sunlight on the pool, and Isabella's teasing all seemed grotesquely out of place. His heart pounded, guilt crashing over him in relentless waves. He had left the woman he loved, or thought he loved, alone at the most critical moment of her life. Isabella, noticing the sudden change in his demeanor, leaned in, her voice soft and insistent. "It'll be fine, Julian. Don't panic. Maybe they're overreacting." Her attempt to soothe him, to manipulate his fear into reassurance, fell flat. Julian barely registered her words. The reality of the situation consumed his thoughts, the life of his wife and child, entirely dependent on medical professionals, while he had been distracted by indulgence and self-interest. Every second that passed felt unbearably long, every mile he would need to cover to reach the hospital a race against time. In that moment, Julian confronted the stark consequences of his choices. The realization that his obsession with pleasure, appearances, and another woman had jeopardized the lives of his wife and unborn child was suffocating. The gravity of his neglect was undeniable, and for the first time, Julian felt powerless, terrified, and fully accountable. The doctor's call was not just an alert, it was a turning point, a sudden, irreversible confrontation with the impact of his arrogance and selfishness, forcing him to face a reality he could no longer ignore. Julian Kane's vacation suddenly transformed from leisurely indulgence to a frantic nightmare. The sun-soaked terrace and sparkling pool that had moments ago felt like paradise now seemed suffocating, a cruel reminder of the choices that had led him here. Anxiety and guilt gnawed at him relentlessly as he booked the earliest possible flight back to the city. Every passing minute was heavy with dread, each thought consumed by Sophia and the unborn child whose lives depended on him showing up, not just physically, but emotionally, something he had failed to provide in their most critical hours. Isabella sat beside him in the car en route to the airport, her designer sunglasses reflecting a world Julian no longer cared about. She tried to maintain her composure, offering reassurances and attempting to lighten the mood, but her superficiality clashed sharply with the gravity of the situation. Her laughter felt jarring, her casual remarks about vacations and appearances irrelevant and even irritating in the face of potential tragedy. Julian barely registered her words, his mind spinning with fear, guilt, and self-recrimination. The realization of how misplaced his priorities had been hit him harder with each passing second. Luxury and indulgence had blinded him to the most important responsibility of his life. The airport was a blur of chaos, rushing through security, boarding, and finally taking his seat as the plane lifted off. Every bump, every sound of the engines, seemed amplified by the tension coiling in his chest. He imagined Sophia in the hospital, enduring the contractions, the fear, and the pain without his presence. The thought of her strength contrasted with his own panic made him feel simultaneously ashamed and desperate to make amends. Hours later, the city skyline came into view, signaling the final leg of the race against time. Julian's pulse raced as he navigated traffic toward the hospital, each stoplight and delay feeling like a potential catastrophe. Meanwhile, Sophia remained unaware of the turmoil her absence had sparked, focusing entirely on the arrival of her child and drawing strength from the steady, compassionate support of the hospital staff. The contrast could not have been starker, a woman confronting life and death with courage and resilience, and a man confronting the consequences of his selfishness with terror and regret. Every second underscored the gravity of Julian's neglect and the pivotal moment he was about to face. The labor room was filled with a controlled intensity, the air thick with the sounds of monitors, gentle instructions, and the rhythmic breathing Sophia relied on to steady herself. Each contraction tested her body and spirit, but she endured with a courage that surprised even herself. The hospital staff moved with precision and empathy, guiding her through the pain, offering words of encouragement, and handling every complication with professionalism and care. Friends and family members, gathered nearby, watched in awe at her resilience, whispering prayers and sharing quiet, supportive glances that reinforced the sense of community and strength surrounding her. After hours of grueling labor, a final push brought a cry that seemed to pierce the tension in the room, a sound that signaled life, triumph, and the culmination of enduring strength. Sophia's baby, healthy and vigorous, was placed in her arms, and in that moment, the exhaustion, fear, and pain melted into a profound sense of accomplishment and relief. Tears streamed down her face, mingling with the sweat and effort of the hours spent battling both physical pain and emotional isolation. The birth became more than a medical event, it symbolized reclamation of dignity, courage, and the beginning of a life renewed, one not defined by absence, neglect, or betrayal. Julian Kane arrived moments later, breathless from rushing through traffic, guilt and shame written across his face. The sight that met him as he entered the room stopped him in his tracks, Sophia, serene yet glowing with exertion, holding their newborn child with a quiet pride that contrasted sharply with his own panic and selfishness. For the first time, he witnessed the strength he had taken for granted, the fortitude that had carried her through the very ordeal he had chosen to abandon. Confronted with the tangible results of his neglect, Julian felt the weight of every careless decision he had made, every moment he had prioritized indulgence and another woman over his wife and child. Sophia's calm, composed presence, despite everything, amplified his remorse. He could not undo the past hours of absence or the emotional distance he had maintained. In that room, he saw the undeniable consequences of his actions, a wife who had survived, a child who had entered the world safely, and a man confronted with the reality of his selfishness, humbled by the sheer force of her courage and resilience. The fallout from Julian Kane's absence hit almost immediately. News of his neglect had begun to circulate quietly at first, whispered among acquaintances and colleagues, but within hours, the story had gained traction across social media. Videos, screenshots, and commentary highlighting his selfish choice to vacation with Isabella Vaughn instead of being present for Sophia's delivery began to trend. Public perception, once a carefully cultivated asset, turned sharply against him. Friends, business associates, and social circles who had once admired his charm and success now viewed him as callous, irresponsible, and unworthy of the respect he had assumed. Sponsors and corporate partners, sensitive to public image and audience backlash, moved quickly to distance themselves. Luxury brands, tech ventures, and lifestyle endorsements he had relied upon for status and income began issuing statements of disassociation. Contracts were paused or terminated, collaborations cancelled. Every public appearance or attempt to justify his absence was met with scrutiny, criticism, and viral ridicule. The world Julian had sought to impress with power and style now reflected the consequences of his choices back at him in unforgiving clarity. Isabella, too, began to retreat, sensing that Julian's actions were harming her as well. The admiration she had sought to gain by being part of his life suddenly seemed less appealing when paired with his public disgrace. Her carefully maintained image could not withstand the weight of his neglect, and she found herself stepping back, her support faltering as the reality of their situation became undeniable. Meanwhile, Sophia remained a pillar of strength and composure. Despite exhaustion, physical strain, and emotional trauma, she navigated the public attention with grace. Interviews, visits from well-wishers, and the quiet dignity she maintained at home highlighted the stark contrast between her resilience and Julian's failures. Her independence and strength were on full display, showing that she did not need him to validate her worth or protect her life. Julian, confronted with the disintegration of his career, personal relationships, and public image, had no one to blame but himself. The world he had prioritized over love and responsibility now mirrored the consequences of his selfishness. Sophia's calm determination and unwavering dignity illuminated the depth of his failures, forcing him to reckon with a truth he could no longer escape: the life he had jeopardized thrived without him, and he had only himself to blame. Sophia Reynolds took her first steps into a life rebuilt on her own terms with a mixture of quiet determination and newfound clarity. The weeks following the birth of her child were demanding, filled with sleepless nights, endless feedings, and the meticulous care required to nurture a newborn, yet each challenge strengthened her resolve. She organized her days around stability, creating routines that provided security and comfort for her child while also fostering her own emotional recovery. Slowly, she reclaimed spaces in her home, in her mind, and in her heart that had been overshadowed by fear, abandonment, and betrayal. Financial and legal steps reinforced her independence. Sophia ensured that her child's needs were prioritized, securing resources and protections that Julian's absence and neglect could no longer compromise. Every decision she made, from healthcare to education planning, was guided by careful thought and love, a stark contrast to Julian's impulsive self-interest. With each passing day, she reclaimed her autonomy, proving that her strength did not require validation from anyone else. Meanwhile, Julian Kane was left to confront the irreversible consequences of his choices. He faced not only public scrutiny and career setbacks but the personal realization that he had jeopardized the life of the woman he claimed to love and the safety of his child. His guilt and remorse became constant companions, forcing reflection on his failures, his misplaced priorities, and the cruelty of his absence. Every glance at Sophia thriving without him, every acknowledgement of her composure and dignity, emphasized the life he could no longer control or influence. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. Sophia's courage and resilience radiated, a living testament to her ability to endure and overcome. Julian's presence was now peripheral, a reminder of what he had lost rather than a source of influence or control. Sophia embraced this new chapter with hope, self-respect, and empowerment, transforming past humiliation and neglect into a foundation of strength. Her journey concluded with unshakable independence and optimism. The trauma, abandonment, and betrayal she endured became catalysts for personal growth. Sophia's life, rooted in love for her child, dignity, and resilience, flourished, while Julian Kane confronted the reality of his selfishness and the enduring impact of his choices. Her story became one of triumph, proving that courage and strength can rise from even the deepest pain.